The daughter they left in the emergency room. Chapter 1. Call an Uber. The first time my mother chose a gala over her own child. I was 9 years old. I had fallen from the old oak tree behind our house, split my chin open on a garden stone, and walked into the kitchen, with blood soaking the collar of my school blouse. My father had gone pale. My brother Daniel, only 5 at the time, started crying harder than I did. My mother looked up from a seating chart for a hospital fundraiser and said, "Vivian Cross does not arrive late because children climb trees." Then she pressed a monogrammed napkin against my chin, told my father to handle it, and returned to arranging rich strangers at tables, according to how much money they had promised to donate. That was Vivian Cross. Not cruel in the loud way, not the kind of woman who threw dishes or shouted herself red-faced in hallways. No, my mother's cruelty wore pearls. It knew which fork to use. It smiled for photographers and kissed cheeks in rooms where everyone smelled of perfume, money, and fresh flowers. By the time I turned 34, I had learned not to expect warmth from her. That did not mean I was ready for what she did to Daniel. The call came at 4:17 a.m. on a Thursday afternoon. I remember the exact time because I was inside a secured server room beneath St. Aurelius Medical Center, reviewing the final encryption layer for the hospital network modernization project. The project was worth more than $1 billion across multiple facilities. It would protect patient records, surgical systems, pharmacy, access, emergency dispatch logs, and every sensitive medical file that could destroy lives if it fell into the wrong hands. And I was the only person holding the master encryption keys. Not that my family cared to them. I was still Elena, the quiet disappointment. The daughter who refused to stand beside Vivian at ribbon cuttings. The daughter who had turned down a position in Cross Meridian Health Investments. My family's glossy empire of private clinics, medical venture funds, and philanthropic foundations. The daughter who preferred code to champagne. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Daniel. I almost let it ring. Not because I didn't love him, but because phones were not supposed to be active inside that room. Then I saw his name flash again. A second call. Then a third. I stepped into the hallway and answered. Elena. It was not Daniel's voice. It was a nurse. There are tones people use when they are trying not to frighten you. Soft, controlled. Too careful. Are you Elena Cross? Sister of Daniel Cross? My blood went cold before she finished the sentence. Yes. Your brother has been in a motor vehicle accident. He's conscious, but he has internal bleeding and a fractured pelvis. He asked us to call you. The hallway seemed to narrow around me. Where is he? St. Aurelius Emergency Department. I was already moving. I am in the building. I ran. People think calm. People do not panic. That is not true. Calm people panic in straight lines. We do not scream. We calculate elevator distance, stairwell access, trauma bay location, blood type, allergies. Who needs to be called? Who should never be trusted? By the time I reached the emergency department, Daniel was behind a curtain, gray-faced and shaking beneath a thin blanket. His dark hair was matted with blood near his temple. His lips trembled when he saw me. "Elle," he whispered. I took his hand. "I am here." His fingers tightened around mine with the strength of someone trying not to fall off the earth. "He hit me," Daniel said. Truck ran the light. I tried calling Mom. Of course he had. Even at 29, after a lifetime of being treated like an accessory, Daniel still believed Vivian might become a mother, if the emergency was serious enough. "She answered?" I asked. Daniel swallowed. His eyes filled, but he blinked hard, embarrassed by the tears. "She said she was at the Marlowe." The Marlowe was a private dining club downtown, where donors gathered beneath chandeliers and pretended their tax advantages were compassion. "She said she had lunch with the hospital board donors," he continued. "She said she couldn't leave." I felt something inside me go silent, not angry silent, the kind of silence that comes before a lock clicks shut. Daniel looked away. She told me to call an Uber. For a moment, the emergency room sounds faded. The monitor beeps, the wheels of carts, the overhead pages, the low voices of nurses. All of it slipped beneath one sentence. Call an Uber. My brother lay in a trauma bay with internal bleeding, and my mother had told him to call an Uber because she did not want to miss lunch. I did not cry. I did not curse. I did not call her and give her the satisfaction of hearing my voice break. I just looked at Daniel and said, "You are not alone." His eyes closed. I stayed beside him through imaging, through surgical consent, through the tense conversation with the trauma surgeon, who explained the bleeding had to be controlled immediately. I signed what needed signing because my father was dead and Vivian, despite being alive, had made herself unavailable. Daniel squeezed my hand before they wheeled him away. "Don't fight with her," he whispered. I leaned close. "I won't." And I meant it. Fighting was noise. I had no intention of making noise. Vivian arrived 6 hours later, not at the emergency room first. She arrived through the private donor entrance, escorted by a hospital administrator, who looked nervous enough to sweat through his suit. My mother wore ivory silk, a gold brooch shaped like a dove, and the soft expression she used when photographers were nearby. "Elena," she said, as if finding me there was mildly inconvenient. I stood from the plastic chair outside recovery. "Daniel is out of surgery." She touched her chest with manicured fingers. "Thank God." The words were perfect. The tone was perfect. Everything about Vivian was always perfect, except the truth. "You told him to call an Uber," I said. Her eyes flicked toward the administrator. "Elena, this is neither the time nor the place." "That's what you told him." Her smile tightened. "I was in the middle of a critical donor commitment. You have no idea how many people depend on the foundation." I looked at her silk dress, her pearls, the tiny hospital donor pin catching the fluorescent light. One of those people was bleeding in the emergency room. Her face hardened, but only for half a second. Then the mask returned. "Your dramatics have always been exhausting." There it was. The old family verdict. Elena is too sensitive. Elena is difficult. Elena does not understand how the real world works. Elena refuses to appreciate what Vivian built. I had heard it so many times it no longer cut me. But Daniel's voice did. "Call an Uber." Vivian stepped closer and lowered her voice. "You will not embarrass me here." I studied her face, and for the first time in my life, I saw something beneath the polish I had missed before. Fear. Not fear for Daniel, not fear of death, injury, pain, or loss. Fear of exposure. That was the first crack. I said nothing. She mistook my silence for surrender, as people like Vivian often do. 2 days later, Daniel was stable, bruised, stitched, wired to machines, but alive. He slept most of the time. I worked from the chair beside his bed, laptop open, secure connection active, hospital badge clipped to my sweater. It began with a coincidence. A contract file. I was reviewing access permissions for the hospital data project when I noticed an old vendor pathway tied to a charitable grant system. It should not have been there. The Cross Family Medical Foundation had sponsored several pilot programs inside St. Aurelius over the years. Rural health outreach, pediatric emergency grants, mobile clinic support, good causes on paper. But one permissions route had been altered 3 months earlier, then hidden beneath a legacy classification tag, the kind of thing most people missed because it looked boring. I do not miss boring things. Boring things are where criminals hide. I traced the access point backward, then sideways, then into a set of archived donor records attached to emergency care expansion funds. The numbers did not match, not by a little, by millions. I sat in Daniel's hospital room while he slept, listening to the faint hiss of oxygen near his bed, and opened file after file. Forged grant applications, duplicated donor pledges, foundation money routed through shell consulting firms, hospital equipment invoices inflated beyond recognition. investor funds disguised as charitable endowments, and again and again. One elegant digital signature, approving transfers, amendments, and donor-facing reports. Vivian Cross. My mother had not merely abandoned compassion. She had monetized it. A nurse entered quietly to check Daniel's vitals. I closed my laptop halfway and smiled like nothing in the world had changed. But everything had, because Vivian had spent years building a reputation as the city's queen of medical charity. She posed with sick children. She stood beside trauma surgeons. She gave speeches about dignity, access, and care for the vulnerable. And beneath all of it, she had been washing investor money through the suffering of people who actually needed help. I could have confronted her. Years earlier, I might have. I might have walked into her glass office and thrown printed records across her desk. I might have demanded an explanation and watched her lie with that flawless mouth. But I was not 9 anymore, bleeding into a monogrammed napkin. I was not 22, waiting for my mother to say she was proud. I was 34 years old. I understood systems. I understood encryption. I understood that powerful people survive accusations, but they rarely survive documentation. So I began quietly. I copied nothing onto unsecured devices. I triggered no alerts. I followed the trails, only where my authorization allowed, and where it ended, I stopped. Then I made a list of what would require a subpoena, what would require forensic recovery, and what would require someone with a badge. At 11:30 a.m. that night, I called Marcus Bell. He answered on the 4th ring. "Elena Cross," he said. "Either the hospital is on fire or you found something ugly." Marcus was a federal healthcare fraud investigator. 3 years earlier, I had helped his team unravel a ransomware attack targeting a children's medical network. I did not ask for credit. I did not want any. But Marcus had told me something afterward. "If you ever find rot inside a hospital system, call me before anyone has time to bleach the floor." I looked at Daniel sleeping beneath a blue hospital blanket. "I found rot," I said. Marcus was silent for one breath. "How bad?" I looked at the folder names on my screen. Foundation grants, Emergency Care Initiative, Donor Conversion Reports, Pediatric Access Fund, Vivian Private. "Worse than ugly," I said. He exhaled slowly. "Do you have proof?" "Some. Enough to move?" "Not yet. Can you get more?" I looked through the glass wall of Daniel's room at the hallway beyond. Nurses moved with tired grace. Families sat in chairs with vending machine coffee and swollen eyes. Real fear, real pain, real need. Then I thought of Vivian at the Marlowe, lifting a crystal glass while her son begged from a trauma bed. "Yes," I said, "but I want it clean. No shortcuts. No leaks before it's ready. No mistakes she can use." Marcus paused. "That sounds personal." "It is, Elena. But it's also true." That mattered, to Marcus, to me. Revenge built on lies is just another crime wearing better lighting. But justice built on truth, that can burn for a long time. Over the next week, I became exactly what my mother had always accused me of being: quiet, difficult, unimpressed. I sat beside Daniel and helped him drink water through a straw. I answered his questions about recovery. I told him nothing about Vivian's files. Then, when he slept, I mapped the architecture of her fraud. Every shell company had a rhythm. Every fake grant had fingerprints. Every donor report contained language copied from legitimate hospital proposals, twisted just enough to pass casual review. Vivian had not done it alone. She had accountants, consultants, maybe board allies. But she was the center. She always needed to be the center. That would be her weakness. People like Vivian believe visibility is power. They confuse applause with armor. They stand on stages, under lights, certain that reputation can protect them from consequence. So I let her stand. I watched interviews where she spoke about the sacred duty of care. I watched social media clips of her visiting hospital wings her foundation had underfunded. I watched her announce the upcoming St. Aurelius Grand Charity Gala, where she would receive the board's highest honor, the Compassionate Leadership Award. When I saw the announcement, I laughed once, not loudly. Just enough that Daniel opened his eyes. "What?" he murmured. "Nothing," I said. But it was not nothing. It was timing. And timing, in my line of work, is everything. Vivian wanted a stage. I decided she could have one. By the end of that first week, Marcus had opened a preliminary channel. I had preserved access logs, identified altered records, recovered deleted email headers, and built a clean index of evidence pathways without contaminating the chain. It was not enough to destroy her yet, but it was enough to begin. On the 8th day, Vivian came to Daniel's room with flowers. White lilies, expensive, scentless, chosen by someone who had never sat beside a patient long enough to know that strong flowers could make nausea worse. Daniel was awake, pale but awake. Vivian kissed the air near his forehead. "My brave boy," she said. He looked at her with the wounded hope of a son, still waiting for an apology. She did not give him one. Instead, she turned to me. "Elena, I expect you'll attend the gala next Friday. It would look strange if you didn't." There it was again. Not please, not your brother nearly died. Not I failed you. It would look strange. I closed my laptop. "I'll be there." Vivian blinked, surprised. For once, I had given her exactly what she wanted. She smiled. "Good. Wear something appropriate." I looked at my mother. At the woman who believed every room belonged to her, because no one had ever made her answer for what she did in them. "I will," I said, and for the first time, she should have been afraid of my obedience. Chapter 2. The Quiet Audit. By the time my mother left Daniel's hospital room, the lilies were already in the trash. I waited until her heels faded down the corridor, then lifted the crystal vase from the side table and carried it to the nurse's station. The nurse on duty, a woman named Priya with tired eyes and a voice gentle enough to calm storms, looked up from her chart. "Allergies?" she asked. "Something like that." She glanced toward Daniel's room. Then at the lilies. "Those flowers are terrible for recovery rooms anyway." "Then we agree." She smiled faintly and pointed to a utility bin near the wall. I dropped them in. It was a small thing. Petty, maybe, but sometimes the first act of protection is removing what someone brought only to make themselves look kind. When I returned, Daniel was watching me. "You threw them away?" "Yes." He gave a weak laugh, then winced and touched his ribs. "Mom will hate that. Mom won't notice." His smile faded. Because we both knew it was true. Vivian noticed cameras. Vivian noticed seating arrangements. Vivian noticed jewelry, headlines, rivals, donor names, and whether someone used the correct title when introducing her. She did not notice pain unless pain could be photographed beside her. Daniel turned his head toward the window. Evening light made his face look younger than 29. "She didn't even say sorry," he whispered. I sat beside him. I keep thinking maybe she panicked. Maybe she didn't understand how bad it was. I wanted to let him keep that illusion. Truly, I did. Hope can be a kind of medicine when someone is lying broken in a hospital bed. I had no desire to rip away the last soft thing Daniel had left, but I had spent too many years watching Vivian survive, because everyone softened the truth for her. "She understood enough," I said gently. Daniel closed his eyes. A tear slid sideways into his hair. "She's our mother." I know. That was the cruelest part. If Vivian had been a stranger, we would have known what to call her. If she had been a business rival, a corrupt executive, a polished criminal behind a charitable mask, I could have handled her cleanly. But she was our mother, and there is no betrayal quite like the betrayal of someone whose hands were supposed to be the first place you were safe. Daniel slept after that. Pain medication pulled him under. and I stayed in the chair with my laptop balanced across my knees. The glow of the screen turning the room pale blue. Outside, the hospital continued its endless rhythm. A code was called, 2 floors up, a baby cried somewhere in maternity. A man argued softly with an insurance representative near the elevators. Machines breathed, beeped, measured, warned. Hospitals never sleep. They only shift their grief from room to room. I opened the secure index I had started building. I named it simply, asterisk, VC, Foundation Review. Not revenge, not mother, not gala. Emotion had no place in file names. The first rule of a clean investigation is discipline. You do not label things according to what you feel, you label them according to what they are. Dates, sources, hash values, access paths, custody notes, permission boundaries. Every action logged, every document preserved in a way that could survive court scrutiny. Vivian had built her fraud on glamour. I would dismantle it with boring precision. The earliest irregularity I found was 4 years old. A rural emergency access grant had been approved through the Cross Family Medical Foundation for 3 mobile trauma units. The public report showed glossy photographs, smiling staff, and Vivian standing beside a wrapped van with the foundation logo printed across the side. The grant amount was listed at $18.06 million. The actual vendor invoice, buried in a hospital procurement archive, was $6.02 million. That left $12.04 million wandering somewhere. It did not belong. I followed the accounting trail through 3 consulting entities with names so generic they were almost comical. Brightpath Advisory, Civic Health Solutions, Meridian Outreach Partners. All 3 were registered within the same week. All 3 used the same legal agent. All 3 billed the foundation for implementation strategy, donor alignment modeling, and community engagement infrastructure. In other words, fog. Rich criminals love fog. They use phrases that sound expensive and mean nothing. They wrap theft in vocabulary no normal person wants to question, because questioning it makes them feel unsophisticated. Vivian had counted on that. She had counted on board members being too vain to admit they didn't understand the paperwork. She had counted on donors preferring applause over audits. She had counted on hospital administrators not wanting to jeopardize future funding by asking why past funding smelled like smoke. Most of all, she had counted on family silence. That part ended with me. At 1:12 a.m., I sent Marcus Bell a secure message through the channel he had set up. Pattern begins at least 4 years back. Possible shell structures. Grant inflation. Need subpoena for bank transfer endpoints. Preserving metadata. No export beyond authorized materials. His reply came 11 minutes later. Good. Do not overreach. Build map. Will request warrants if threshold is met. Any sign of patient data exposure? I checked the access logs again. That was the part that made my hands go still. Vivian's fraud had brushed against patient systems. Maybe not directly, maybe not intentionally, but some of the same corrupted grant pathways had been attached to the hospital modernization project, the billion-dollar project. My project. A fraudulent foundation report had referenced emergency response data integration, milestones that were not supposed to be public. Donor facing materials included technical descriptions that looked lifted from confidential planning documents. Someone had been using the hospital's digital transformation as decoration for fake funding narratives. And because Vivian was Vivian, decoration was never harmless. I typed back. Possible improper access to modernization planning docs. No evidence of patient record breach yet. Investigating logs within my scope. Marcus replied. Yet is the word that worries me. Me too. I looked at Daniel. He slept with one hand curled near his chest. His breathing shallow but steady. A bruise darkened his jaw. Beneath the blanket, surgical drains carried blood into clear containers marked with measurement lines. Vivian had told him to call an Uber, and now I was beginning to suspect. Her greed had not only robbed donors, investors, and patients of promised care, it might have endangered the very systems that kept people alive. I kept working. By morning, my eyes burned. I had slept 40 minutes with my head against the wall, and woken up with a stiff neck and a line of code still blinking on my screen. Daniel was awake, watching a hospital breakfast tray, as if it had personally offended him. "Is that oatmeal?" he asked. "I think it's a warning," he smiled. For a moment, we were just brother and sister again. Not victims, not witnesses, not children of Vivian Cross, just Elena and Daniel, making fun of institutional oatmeal under fluorescent lights. "Can you do me a favor?" he asked. "Anything. If Mom comes back, don't let her bring photographers." My chest tightened. "She tried." He looked embarrassed. "She texted me, said the foundation's media director wanted one strength and recovery image for the gala video. I didn't answer." A heat passed through me so clean and sharp, I almost welcomed it. Vivian had not apologized, but she wanted footage. "Forward me the text," I said. Daniel hesitated. Just forward it." He studied me carefully. "You are doing that thing." "What thing?" "The quiet thing." I closed my laptop halfway. "I've always been quiet." "No," Daniel said. "It here is normal quiet. Then, T here is the quiet you get when someone is about to regret underestimating you." I looked at him. For all his softness, Daniel had always seen more than people gave him credit for. "I am handling something," I said. "Is it about Mom?" I did not answer quickly enough. His face changed. "Elena, you need to heal." "That means yes." "It means you need to heal." Daniel breathed out, tired and frustrated. "She'll twist it. Whatever it is, she always does." "I know. She'll make you look angry, unstable, ungrateful." "I know. She'll say you are jealous because you never wanted the family business." "I know." He stared at me. "Then why aren't you scared?" I thought about that. I had been scared of Vivian most of my life. Not physically. She was not that kind of threat, but emotionally, socially, psychologically. She had ruled our family by controlling the story. If Vivian said you were selfish, people believed you were selfish. If Vivian said you were fragile, people treated you like glass. If Vivian said you were difficult, doors closed before you reached them. For years I had feared her ability to define me, but sitting in that hospital room, after seeing what she had done to Daniel, after reading the files, after tracing stolen money through fake charity and polished lies, I realized something almost peaceful. Vivian could still talk. But I had evidence. "I am not scared," I said, "because this time she doesn't get to narrate the ending." Daniel looked away, but I saw his mouth tremble. "Just don't let her destroy you." I touched his hand. "She won't." That afternoon, Marcus came to the hospital. He did not arrive like television agents arrive. No dramatic coat. No sharp sunglasses. No swarm of federal authority moving through automatic doors. Marcus Bell wore a plain navy suit, carried a battered leather folder, and looked like a tired accountant who knew where every body was buried. Because bodies eventually become paperwork. He met me in a family consultation room near the surgical wing. "You look like hell," he said. "Nice to see you too. Have you slept?" Define slept. "Elena. I am fine." "No, you are functional. T here is a difference." I slid a printed summary across the table. Not original files. Not unsecured copies. A summary, clean, dated, logged. Marcus read without speaking. That was one of the reasons I trusted him. He did not perform outrage. He absorbed facts. After several minutes, he looked up. "This is not small. Number. You understand what happens if we open this officially?" "Yes." Your mother becomes a target of a federal healthcare fraud investigation. Anyone tied to these transfers gets pulled in. Foundation officers, hospital administrators, private investors, board members, maybe family accounts. I understand. If your name appears anywhere in the system, we have to examine that too. It won't. You are sure? I held his gaze. My mother considered me too disappointing to include in her crimes. For the first time, Marcus almost smiled. That may turn out to be the best insult she ever gave you. It usually is. He tapped the summary. This gala, next Friday? Yes. She's receiving an award? Compassionate leadership? Marcus looked at me over the top of the page. You are kidding. I wish I were. He sat back. Public events complicate things. They also create pressure. That sounds like revenge talking. It is revenge, I said. But it's documented revenge. Marcus did not laugh. Elena, listen to me carefully. I don't care what she did to your brother. Actually, I do care. But legally, I can't let that drive the case. If this becomes a spectacle before the warrants are ready, she walks into court claiming malicious targeting, family vendetta, emotional manipulation. Her lawyers will eat that alive. I know. Then tell me you are not planning some dramatic slideshow. I am not. Tell me you are not hacking the gala screens. I am not. Tell me you are not going to stand up during dessert and accuse her in front of donors. I am not. He studied me. What are you planning? I folded my hands on the table. To attend. That's it? That's all she invited me to do. Marcus stared at me for a long moment. Then he understood. The gala was not my weapon. Vivian was. Her arrogance. Her visibility. Her need to be adored in public. Her certainty that no one would dare challenge her, while she stood beneath chandeliers collecting applause for compassion. I did not need to create a spectacle. I only needed to make sure the truth arrived at the same time she did. Marcus closed the folder. I can't promise timing. I am not asking you to. Yes, you are. I am asking you to follow the evidence, Elena. And if the evidence matures before the gala, I said, then Vivian's schedule is not my concern. His expression remained stern, but something in his eyes shifted. Send me the access log map, only through the secure channel, no speculation. No emotional framing. Already prepared. Of course it is. He stood, then paused at the door. How's Daniel? I looked through the consultation room window toward the hall. Alive. Marcus nodded. Sometimes that has to be enough for day one. After he left, I returned to Daniel's room and found Vivian standing beside his bed. She had brought no flowers this time. Instead, she had brought a photographer. A young man with a camera hanging around his neck stood awkwardly near the door, clearly wishing the floor would open and swallow him. Daniel looked pale and furious. Vivian turned as I entered. Elena, don't make that face. What face? The face that suggests I am doing something wrong. Vivian laughed softly. Excuse me. I did not raise my voice. This is a medical recovery room, not a campaign set. Leave. The photographer glanced between us. Vivian's eyes sharpened. He is here with permission. Daniel gave permission. Vivian opened her mouth. Daniel said. Number, one word. Weak, but clear. The photographer immediately stepped back. I am sorry, I didn't know. I'll wait outside. Go home, I said. He went. Vivian's face hardened after the door closed. You have always enjoyed humiliating me. I almost admired the efficiency of it. She could walk into her injured son's room with a camera and still make herself the victim within 10 seconds. You did that yourself, I said. She moved closer, lowering her voice into the tone she used when she wanted to cut without leaving visible marks. You think because you play with computers, you understand power. Daniel's eyes moved toward me. Vivian continued. You don't power is relationships. Power is trust. Power is walking into rooms where people matter and having them stand when you arrive. I looked at her. Number. That's theater. Her mouth tightened. Careful, Elena. There it was. The warning from my childhood. The invisible leash. Careful, or I will tell them what you are. Careful, or I will make you small. Careful, or I will turn the room against you. But the room had changed. This room had monitors, 4 bags, surgical drains, and a brother who had heard his mother tell him to find his own ride while he was bleeding. I stepped close enough that only she could hear me. Next Friday, I said. When you accept that award, make sure you thank everyone. Vivian's eyes narrowed. What is that supposed to mean? It means you love an audience. For the first time, the mask slipped completely. Not for long, less than a second. But I saw it. Uncertainty. Then she smiled. You are jealous, she whispered. You always have been, jealous that I built something beautiful while you hid behind screens. I could have told her then. I could have told her the beautiful thing was already cracking, that her emails were breathing again after deletion, that her grant applications had timestamps, that her shell companies had patterns, that Marcus Bell knew her name. Instead, I let her believe she had won the moment. That was important. Arrogant people make mistakes when they feel challenged, but they make fatal mistakes when they feel safe. So I lowered my eyes just enough. Vivian mistook it for defeat. She turned to Daniel, touched his blanket with 2 fingers, and said, Rest well, sweetheart. I'll see you when my schedule allows. Then she left. Daniel waited until the door closed. She's afraid, he said. I looked at him. He swallowed. I've never seen that before. I sat beside him and opened my laptop. No, I said. Neither have I. That night, Vivian sent the gala seating chart to the family group text. My name was listed at table 19, near the back, beside a hospital procurement consultant, a local lifestyle columnist, and 2 donors whose names had been misspelled. I smiled. Table 19 was perfect. From there, I could see the whole room. Chapter 3. Table 19. By Friday morning, the city had already started applauding my mother. Her face was on the society page before breakfast. Vivian Cross. A lifetime of compassionate leadership. There she was in the photograph, standing in a cream suit beneath the glass entrance of St. Aurelius Medical Center. One hand resting over her heart, as if she kept one there. Behind her, hospital banners fluttered in the spring wind. Beside her, 3 executives smiled like men who had learned long ago that appearing beside money was safer than questioning it. The article described her as tireless. That word stayed with me. Tireless, as if cruelty did not require energy, as if deception did not demand maintenance, as if my mother had not spent years working very hard to look generous while stealing from the desperate. I read the article in Daniel's hospital room while he slept. The reporter praised the Cross Family Medical Foundation for its emergency care initiatives, rural trauma programs, mobile clinics, pediatric access grants, and donor-driven modernization partnerships. Every phrase had a file behind it now. Every smiling line was attached to a document. A transfer, a false invoice, a forged approval, or a ghost vendor that existed only long enough to swallow money. Vivian had not just committed fraud. She had built a cathedral out of stolen mercy. At 8:03 a.m., Marcus sent a message through the secure channel. Threshold met. Federal action pending. Do not interfere. Attend if you must. Do not provoke. I stared at those words for a long moment. Federal action pending. It looked so plain on the screen. So clean, but behind it was a storm of warrants. Affidavits, quiet approvals, sealed communications, and people with badges moving patiently through the machinery of consequence. I typed back one sentence. I will not interfere. Then I closed the laptop. Daniel stirred. You look like you just got good news from someone who doesn't smile. That's accurate. Marcus. I looked at him. He was pale but sharper now. Pain still carved lines around his mouth. But his eyes had changed over the past few days, less wounded hope, more reluctant understanding. Yes, I said. Daniel turned his face toward the ceiling. It's real, isn't it? I did not pretend not to understand. Yes. How bad? Bad enough that I can't tell you everything yet. He nodded slowly. She used the foundation? Yes. Hospital money? Some of it was supposed to become hospital care. He closed his eyes. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy with every charity dinner our mother had dragged us to as children, every photo where Daniel had been dressed in a little suit and told to stand straighter, every speech where Vivian had said family taught her the meaning of service. She used us too, he whispered. I did not answer because he was right. Vivian had used Daniel's softness, my quietness, our father's old reputation, the Cross name, the grief after his death, the hospital's need, the donor's vanity, the public's trust. Everything was material to her. Even love, especially love. Daniel looked at me. Are you going tonight? Yes. Why? Because she asked me to. That's not a reason. With Vivian, it is. He studied me the way he used to when we were kids. And I was building something complicated on the carpet, wires and little circuit boards spread around me while he guarded the door, so our mother wouldn't call it junk. You are going to watch. Yes, is that all? For me, yes. His eyes searched mine. And for her? I picked up my coat from the chair. For her, it depends on how much truth she can survive. He did not smile. Be careful. I leaned down and kissed his forehead. That word doesn't work on me anymore. The St. Aurelius Grand Charity Gala took place in the old Meridian Ballroom, the kind of room wealthy people love, because it allows them to feel historic, without being inconvenienced by history. Marble columns rose toward a painted ceiling. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen rain. Every table glowed with candles and white roses. A string quartet played near the entrance, beneath a banner that read Compassion in Motion. I arrived alone. That mattered. Vivian liked surrounding herself with witnesses. Her people entered rooms in clusters. Assistants, board members, donors, stylists, executives, minor politicians, anyone who could reflect her light back at her. She believed solitude was weakness. I had learned solitude was clean. A young woman at check-in scanned the guest list and smiled too brightly. Elena Cross, table 19. I know. Her smile wavered, perhaps because I said it kindly, but without surprise. A volunteer handed me a program embossed in silver. On the cover was my mother's name. Inside, there was a tribute page featuring one of Vivian's favorite photographs, her kneeling beside a child in a hospital bed, touching the child's hand with theatrical tenderness. I knew that photograph. I remembered the day it was taken. The child had been recovering from complications after emergency surgery, and Vivian had spent 12 minutes in the room. 9 of those minutes involved adjusting the lighting. I walked through the ballroom. People glanced at me and looked away. Some recognized me but could not place me. Others knew exactly who I was and made the old calculation. Elena Cross, the daughter who did not join the family enterprise. The quiet one, the difficult one, the one Vivian mentioned with careful sadness when she wanted sympathy. A man near the bar leaned toward his wife and whispered something as I passed. I kept walking. Table 19 was exactly where I expected it to be, near the back, close enough to the service doors to be forgotten, far enough from the stage to be insulted. My place card sat between Martin Voss, procurement consultant, and Celia Brent, lifestyle columnist. Both were already seated, both pretending not to wonder why Vivian Cross's daughter had been placed at the social equivalent of a storage closet. Martin stood halfway when I arrived. Elena, isn't it? Yes. Martin Voss, I believe we met at a facilities luncheon last year. We did. He looked relieved that I remembered him. Celia Brent gave me a quick smile that did not reach her eyes. Your mother looks radiant tonight. She usually does. Celia waited for more. I gave her nothing. That is one of the great powers of silence. People who live by gossip cannot stand empty space. They will rush to fill it. And in doing so, they often reveal what they came carrying. Celia lowered her voice. I heard your brother had a terrible accident. He did. How awful. Vivian must be devastated. I unfolded my napkin and placed it in my lap. She has been very busy. Celia blinked. Martin found sudden interest in his water glass. Across the room, Vivian entered. The atmosphere changed immediately. Not dramatically, not enough for most people to identify. But I felt it ripple through the ballroom. Heads turned, smiles sharpened. Conversations lifted half a tone. A photographer moved backward ahead of her, capturing her arrival. My mother wore deep emerald satin, a color chosen carefully to suggest dignity, wealth, and softness she did not possess. Diamonds rested at her throat. Her silver blonde hair had been swept into an elegant twist. She moved through the room, touching arms, kissing cheeks, receiving admiration, as if it were oxygen. Behind her walked 2 hospital board members, the foundation's executive director, and a man I recognized from the files. Elliot Shaw, Civic Health Solutions. One of the fog companies. In person, he looked smaller than his invoices, thin, nervous, polished in the way men become polished when they spend too much time around powerful women and not enough time around consequences. He stood near Vivian's shoulder, smiling too often. I took out my phone and sent one message to Marcus. Elliot Shaw present. The reply came quickly. Do nothing. I almost smiled. That had become the theme of the evening. Do nothing. Let the room speak. Let Vivian shine. Let the guilty gather close to the warmth of their own performance. Dinner began with roasted salmon, champagne, and speeches from people who used the word community as if it belonged to them. A hospital executive praised donor partnerships. A councilman described Vivian as a moral force. A pediatric surgeon, likely unaware of the rot beneath him, spoke sincerely about lives saved through emergency access funding. That part hurt. Not every person in that room was corrupt. That was the tragedy. Many were vain. Yes, some were careless. Some had looked away because money made looking away comfortable. But others had believed, truly believed. They had trusted Vivian's foundation because hospitals always needed more. More ambulances, more staff, more beds, more equipment, more grants to cover the gap between suffering and payment. Fraud inside healthcare is not only theft of money, it is theft of possibility. A trauma unit that never arrived. A rural clinic that closed. A child transferred too late. A nurse working double because funds disappeared into consulting language. I sat at table 19 and listened to applause paid for by absence. At 8:41 a.m., Marcus sent another message. Action moving. 2 words. My pulse did not quicken. My hands did not shake. I put the phone face down beside my plate. Vivian was called to the stage at 8:52 a.m. The ballroom rose before she reached the steps. A standing ovation, of course. My mother paused at the base of the stage as though overwhelmed. One hand pressed to her heart, head bowed just enough to look humble from the front tables. The photographer caught it. The donors smiled. The board chair helped her up the steps. Celia Brent dabbed at the corner of one eye. She really is extraordinary, she whispered. I looked at Vivian standing beneath the spotlight. Yes, I said. She is. The board chair introduced her with a voice thick with ceremony. Vivian Cross has shown us that leadership is not merely about resources, but about compassion. It is about answering when people call. It is about being present when the vulnerable need us most. At that, something inside me went very still again. Answering when people call, being present. Daniel's voice came back to me, thin and ashamed from a trauma bed. She told me to call an Uber. Vivian accepted the glass award with both hands. It caught the chandelier light and scattered it across the ceiling like broken ice. She stepped to the microphone. "My friends," she began, "I am deeply humbled." No, she wasn't. I have always believed that the measure of a life is not what we gather for ourselves, but what we give to those who cannot repay us. Martin Voss shifted beside me. Perhaps he heard it too. Not the hypocrisy. Exactly, the danger of two perfect words. Vivian continued. "When my late husband and I began this foundation, we wanted to create a promise that no family, no child, no patient in crisis would ever feel abandoned in their hour of need." My fingers curled around the edge of my napkin. There it was. The sentence. The universe, if it has a sense of justice, has a brutal sense of timing. No patient in crisis would ever feel abandoned. At the back of the ballroom, the double doors opened. Not loudly. No crash. No shout. No dramatic interruption, just the soft opening of heavy doors. Two men entered first, both in dark suits. A woman followed. Then another man. Their faces were calm, their steps measured. They did not look around like guests searching for assigned seats. They looked like people who already knew where everyone was. Marcus was not with them. Good, he was too careful to turn justice into theater. But I recognized federal posture when I saw it. So did Elliot Shaw. His champagne glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Vivian had not seen them yet. She was still speaking. "This work has never been about recognition." The agents moved along the side wall, discreet at first. One stopped near the hospital board chair. Another approached the foundation's executive director. A third moved toward Elliot Shaw. The room began to notice in fragments. A turned head, a paused fork, a whisper. The quartet faltered, then recovered. Vivian's smile held, but her eyes flicked toward the movement near the wall. "Rather," she continued, "it has been about duty." The agent closest to the stage waited until she finished the sentence. Then he stepped forward. "Mrs. Cross?" The microphone caught the words. A ripple passed through the ballroom. Vivian looked down at him. For one glorious second, annoyance overpowered fear. She believed, even then, that someone had violated protocol, that the crime was not hers, but the interruption. "I am in the middle of remarks," she said lightly. The agent held up his credentials. "Vivian Cross. I am Special Agent David Leland, with the Federal Healthcare Fraud Division. We need you to step down from the podium." The ballroom inhaled as one body. Vivian's smile remained, but it no longer fit her face. "I beg your pardon? You need to step down." The microphone captured that too. A board member rose from the front table. "What is this about?" Another agent turned to him. "Sir, please remain where you are." The word "please" did not make it a request. Celia Brent's mouth had fallen open. Martin Voss whispered, "My God." Vivian looked across the room. Not at the agents. Not at the board. At me, from the stage under the lights, with the award still in her hand. My mother found table 19. And then she knew. Not everything. Not the warrants. Not the emails. Not Marcus. Not the recovered files. Not the donor packets landing in inboxes and legal offices and media desks at that exact moment. But she knew I had not come to admire her. She leaned toward the microphone, her voice cold beneath the polish. "Elena." My name traveled through the speakers. Every head turned toward the back of the ballroom. There it was, the old move. Drag me into the light, make me the unstable daughter. Make the room look at me instead of her. I did not stand. I did not speak. I simply looked at her. The agent at the stage said, "Mrs. Cross, step down now." Vivian's hand tightened around the award. "This is a family matter." The agent's face did not change. "No, ma'am. It is not. That sentence broke something open. People began reaching for phones. Donors whispered fiercely. A hospital executive turned pale. Elliot Shaw was being guided toward a side exit by two agents. His face shining with sweat. The foundation's executive director had both hands over her mouth. Vivian stood frozen. For a woman who had spent her life commanding rooms, she seemed confused by one that no longer obeyed. The board chair moved toward her, but an agent blocked him. Another agent reached the stage steps. Mrs. Cross. Vivian looked back at me again. This time, there was no mask. Only hatred, pure, personal, astonished. As if betrayal belonged exclusively to her. As if I had broken some sacred rule by refusing to remain wounded quietly. Then she did something almost funny. She tried to smile. Even as federal agents waited at the stage, even as donors backed away from their tables, even as phones lifted and cameras turned, even as her life began folding inward around the truth, Vivian Cross tried one last time to look compassionate. "I am sure," she said into the microphone, "there has been some misunderstanding." At that exact moment, every major donor in the ballroom received the evidence packet. Phones buzzed, one after another. Across the tables, screens lit up like small fires. Martin Voss looked at his face drained. Celia Brent opened hers, read 3 lines, and whispered, "Oh my God." The board chair checked his phone, then looked at Vivian, as if seeing a stranger wearing a familiar skin. The packet was not dramatic. No insults. No emotional accusations. No family history. Just records. Forged grant applications. Inflated invoices. Shell company links. Transfer summaries. Deleted email recovery logs. Donor misrepresentation charts. A note from federal investigators instructing recipients to preserve communications and refrain from destroying documents. Truth does not need adjectives when it has attachments. Vivian watched the room red. That was when she understood the scale. Not an argument, not a family scandal, not a daughter's accusation. She could smother with reputation. A case, a clean, documented, federally anchored case. The award slipped from her hand. It hit the stage floor and cracked. The sound was small. The silence afterward was enormous. The agent stepped beside her. "Mrs. Cross, come with us." For a second, I thought she might refuse. I thought the old Vivian might rise one final time. Voice sharpened. Chin lifted, commanding obedience from people too stunned to resist. But then she looked at the ballroom. No one came. Not the donors. Not the board. Not the executives. Not even the people who had once stood when she entered a room. Power, stripped of illusion, is often much smaller than it looked from the back. Vivian descended the stage. Agents walked beside her, not touching her yet. They gave her the dignity of movement, though she had given so little dignity to others. As she passed through the center aisle, people leaned away. That hurt her most. Not the investigation. Not the evidence. Not even the loss. It was the leaning away, the physical withdrawal of admiration. I watched from table 19. Vivian stopped when she reached me. The agents paused with her. Up close, I could see the tiny cracks in her makeup near her mouth, the tremor beneath her jaw, the fury in her eyes searching for a weakness she could still press. "You did this," she said. Her voice was low, but everyone nearby heard it. I looked at her calmly. "No," I said. "You did." Her face twisted. "I gave you everything." I thought of my father taking me to get stitches while she stayed with her seating chart. I thought of Daniel bleeding in a trauma bay. I thought of rural clinics promised help that never came. I thought of money moving under false names, while Vivian smiled beside sick children. "No," I said. "You took everything you could reach." For once, she had no answer. The agent guided her forward, and just like that, Vivian Cross left the gala she had built to worship herself. Walking between federal agents beneath chandeliers paid for by donors, who were now reading the truth on their phones. No one applauded after she was gone. The ballroom became chaos. Reporters outside had already begun calling. Board members huddled near the stage. Donors demanded answers from people who had none. Hospital executives issued sentences that began confidently and died halfway through. Somewhere near the side doors, Celia Brent was speaking rapidly into her phone, no doubt rewriting Vivian's legacy before dessert. Martin Voss turned to me. "Did you know?" I folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate. "I knew enough to attend." He swallowed. "Your mother is going to prison, isn't she?" I stood. "That depends on the courts." "Where are you going?" "To see my brother." Outside, the night air was cool. The ballroom behind me glowed golden through tall windows, still beautiful from a distance. That was the thing about corruption. From far enough away, under enough light, almost anything can look elegant. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus, clean execution, more coming. "Your brother safe?" I looked toward the hospital tower rising against the dark. I typed back, "Yes." Then another message appeared. "You did well by doing nothing." I stared at it for a moment. Doing nothing, it sounded passive. But I knew better. Silence was not nothing. Patience was not nothing. Discipline was not nothing. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the only one building the structure strong enough to hold the truth. When I reached Daniel's room, he was awake. The television was on mute. Vivian's face filled the screen, caught mid-speech beneath the headline, "Federal Agents Interrupt Charity, Gala Honoring Vivian Cross." Daniel looked at me. "It happened." "Yes." He turned back to the screen. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "I thought I'd feel happy." I sat beside him. "What do you feel?" He swallowed. "Like I finally stopped waiting for her to become someone else." That was the real aftermath of betrayal. Not the public collapse, not the headlines, not the handcuffs or the ruined speeches. It was the private death of an impossible hope. I took his hand. "I am sorry." He looked at me, eyes wet. "Don't be. You came when I called." Outside his room, nurses moved through the night. Machines hummed. Somewhere in the emergency department below, another family was arriving terrified, praying someone would answer. I looked at Daniel's bruised hand in mine, and made a promise I did not say aloud. Vivian's foundation would fall, but something real would rise in its place. Not for donors, not for cameras, for the people who called and needed someone to come. Chapter 4. The Price of Applause. The morning after the gala, Vivian Cross became a headline, not the kind she had spent decades buying with donations, polished interviews, and carefully staged photographs beside hospital beds. This headline had no flattering portrait, no praise, no elegant language about service. Federal fraud investigation targets Cross Family Medical Foundation. By noon, every local station had replayed the same clip. My mother at the podium, glass award in hand, smiling beneath the words, "Compassionate Leadership," while federal agents entered the ballroom behind her. She had always wanted to be unforgettable. Now she was. Daniel watched only once. Then he turned off the television and asked for ice chips. That was Daniel. Even broken, even betrayed, he understood when a wound needed silence more than spectacle. I spent the next 3 days inside two worlds. By daylight, I worked with hospital leadership, federal liaisons, compliance counsel, and cybersecurity auditors to isolate every system Vivian's fraud had touched. By night, I sat beside Daniel while he slept, answering questions from doctors, dodging calls from relatives, and ignoring messages from people who had never cared about me until scandal gave them a reason. The family group text exploded first. Aunt Marjorie wrote, "Elena, what have you done?" Cousin Brett wrote, "This could destroy all of us." A former foundation assistant wrote privately, I knew something was wrong, but I was scared. That one I answered. Preserve everything, speak to counsel. Tell the truth. Vivian did not call me. Not at first, her attorneys did. 3 of them, one after another. Each more expensive than the last. They wanted to know what documents I had accessed, who I had contacted, whether I understood the seriousness of interfering in Foundation governance. I forwarded every message to Marcus. Then I blocked them. On the 4th day, my mother called from a number I did not recognize. I almost did not answer. Then I thought of Daniel lying in that trauma bay. Hoping she would come, I answered. Elena. Her voice was softer than I expected. Not warm. Vivian did not know warmth, but scraped down. Human around the edges. Mother. A pause. You've made your point. I looked through the glass wall of the hospital conference room, where compliance officers were reviewing emergency funding contracts, line by line. No, I said. The evidence made the point. You think you are righteous. I think Daniel almost died while you were networking over lunch. Her breath sharpened. That situation has been exaggerated. He was bleeding internally. I didn't know that. He told you he was in the emergency room. I had obligations. There it was. Even now, even after everything. Obligations. Not children. Not truth. Not mercy. Only obligations that came with linen napkins and donor lists. You should take a plea, I said. The silence that followed was the first honest thing she had given me. Then she laughed once. Low and bitter. You sound just like your father when he was disappointed in me. I had not expected that. My father had been dead 7 years, and Vivian almost never spoke of him, except in speeches. She used his memory like a letterhead, a signature that made her look legitimate. What did Dad know? I asked. Enough to become inconvenient. My hand tightened around the phone. What does that mean? It means your father had a sentimental weakness for truth, like you. I stood very still. Did he know about the foundation? He suspected, she said. He didn't understand the scale. The scale, she said it, like a business expansion. Is that why he wanted an independent audit before he died? Another silence. I remembered it suddenly, a dinner, my father's tired face. Vivian's bright anger. Words muffled through the study door. Audit reputation. Fiduciary duty. I had been 27, and too exhausted from building my own life to decode theirs. Yes, Vivian said finally. He wanted to humiliate me. He wanted you to stop. They're the same thing to people like him. No, Mother, they're only the same thing to people like you. Her voice changed then. The softness disappeared. You have no idea what it takes to build influence. Your father never did. Daniel never did. You certainly never did. You all lived under the roof my reputation paid for. Then judged the cost. You stole from emergency care funds. I moved money through structures that kept the foundation alive. You laundered investor money through fake medical grants. I protected a legacy. You abandoned your son. That stopped her. For once, Vivian Cross did not have a polished sentence ready. When she spoke again, the anger was quieter. Daniel was always fragile. No, I said. Daniel was kind. You mistook that for weakness because kindness never impressed donors. Elena, you told him to call an Uber. I heard her breathe. The entire case could have been reduced to that one sentence. Not legally, not financially, but morally. That was Vivian without the chandelier. A mother with a dying son on the phone, choosing lunch. I did not know he was dying, she said. But you knew he was calling. She hung up. I stood in the conference room doorway, for a long time afterward. Phone still in my hand. I had expected rage from her. Threats, denial, blame. I had not expected the hint about my father. That changed the shape of everything, not the outcome. Vivian had already built her own cage, but it deepened the roots. Her fraud was not new. Her cruelty was not sudden. She had spent years silencing anything that threatened the performance of her goodness, including, perhaps, the man who had once tried to stop her. That evening, Daniel asked why I looked pale. I told him about the call. Not all of it. Not the part about Dad. Not yet. He listened quietly. Then he said, "Do you think she loved us?" I hated that question. Not because I did not know the answer, because I did. "I think she loved what we could make her look like." Daniel nodded slowly, as if some old locked room inside him had finally opened. "That's not the same." He looked toward the window where the city lights shimmered beyond the glass. "What happens now?" "Now the board dissolves the foundation's authority. The federal case expands. The hospital freezes every related contract, and I help rebuild the data project, without her people near it." "And Mom? She faces what she did." Daniel closed his eyes. "And us?" I took his hand. "We stopped paying the price for her applause." The next week, the hospital board asked me to remain on the modernization project, under emergency ethical oversight, independent auditors, federal observers, transparent vendor review, no family foundation influence, no donor shortcuts, no private backdoors disguised as philanthropy. For the first time in my life, a room full of powerful people looked at me not as Vivian's disappointing daughter, but as the person who had kept the system from collapsing. I accepted one condition: Daniel's name would never be used for publicity. If we built something in his honor, it would serve patients, not cameras. The board agreed. Maybe because they were ashamed, maybe because they were afraid. Either way, I took the yes. That night, I returned to Daniel's room with coffee. I knew neither of us would drink. He was asleep. On the muted television, a panel of commentators discussed Vivian's fall. Her network, her charges, her possible sentence. I turned it off. Then I sat in the quiet and listened to the steady beep of my brother's heart monitor. It was not applause. It was better. Chapter 5. What rose from the wreckage. Vivian's trial did not begin with shouting. It began with paper. Boxes of it. Bank records, grant agreements, vendor invoices, donor communications, internal memos, deleted emails recovered from servers she thought had forgotten her, forged applications printed in clean stacks, transfer diagrams projected on a courtroom screen, until even the jurors who had never heard the phrase healthcare fraud before understood exactly what she had done. My mother sat at the defense table in navy wool, pearls at her throat, her silver hair perfect. Even then, she dressed like reputation might still save her. It did not. The prosecution did not need drama. Vivian had given them enough truth to work with. They showed how emergency care funds had been inflated, diverted, and buried inside shell companies. They showed how donors had been promised mobile trauma units that were never fully delivered. They showed how hospital modernization language had been stolen and repackaged to lure investors. And then, near the end, they played the recording. Not from me, from Daniel's phone. The voicemail he had saved without thinking. Because wounded people save the voices they still hope will become loving. Vivian's voice filled the courtroom. "Daniel, I cannot leave this lunch. If it's urgent, call an Uber or ask Elena. I have board donors waiting." No one moved. Daniel sat beside me, walking cane resting against his knee. His face was pale, but he did not look away. Vivian did. That was the first time I saw her unable to meet her son's eyes. The jury convicted her on multiple counts. The sentence came weeks later: prison, restitution, permanent removal from any charitable or healthcare financial role. The Cross Family Medical Foundation was dissolved. Its remaining legitimate assets placed under court. Supervised redistribution. When the judge finished, Vivian turned once toward the gallery. For a moment, I thought she might speak to Daniel. Apologize, beg, blame, something. But she only looked at me. There was no hatred left in her face, only disbelief. as if she still could not understand how the quiet daughter had survived her. Then the officers led her away. Daniel exhaled beside me. It sounded like someone setting down a weight he had carried since childhood. Outside the courthouse, reporters called our names, cameras lifted. Questions flew. Elena? Did you plan this from the beginning? Daniel, how do you feel about your mother's conviction? Will the hospital recover the stolen funds? I kept one hand gently on Daniel's arm and said only, "Today belongs to the patients and families who were promised help and did not receive it. That is where the focus should stay." Then we walked away. No victory pose, no speech, no performance. I had learned from Vivian what spectacle cost. 6 months later, the first Cross Emergency Response Fund opened under a different name. Daniel chose it. The No One Alone Fund. It was simple. Almost too simple for a world addicted to branding. But Daniel insisted. When people are scared, he said, they shouldn't have to decode poetry. The fund paid for emergency transportation, trauma aftercare, temporary lodging for families, medication gaps, and rural clinic response upgrades. No gala portraits, no donor walls bigger than the work. No staged photographs beside patients. Every dollar was publicly tracked. Every contract was reviewable. Every quarterly report was written in language normal people could understand. That was my condition. Daniel's condition was even better. The first policy line read, "No patient in crisis will be treated as an inconvenience." He wrote it himself. The hospital modernization project continued, this time under strict oversight. I remained lead cybersecurity architect. Not because of my last name, not because of Vivian, because I knew the system. I knew the risks, and I had earned the trust of people who no longer confused quiet with weak. The master encryption keys stayed under multi-party control. No single person, including me, could hold too much power again. That mattered. Revenge can expose a corrupt system. But only humility keeps the next one from becoming corrupt too. Daniel healed slowly. Not cleanly. Healing never is. Some mornings, pain made him furious. Some afternoons, grief made him silent. He missed the mother. He wished he had more than the mother he lost. I understood that. I missed her too sometimes. Though not as she was. I missed the imaginary version of her, the one I had invented as a child, because every child needs somewhere to place hope. One evening, nearly a year after the accident, Daniel and I stood outside the new emergency transport wing. A small bronze plaque had been mounted near the entrance, funded by the No One Alone Fund, in honor of every patient who called for help. No mention of Vivian, no mention of scandal, no mention of us. Daniel leaned on his cane, looking at the ambulances lined beneath the bay lights. "Do you think she knows?" he asked. "About this?" He nodded. "Probably." "Do you think she cares?" I watched a paramedic help an elderly man from the back of an ambulance, while his wife clutched a plastic bag of medications and cried with relief. "I don't know," I said. "But they do." Daniel followed my gaze. For a long time, we stood there without speaking. Then an ambulance pulled in, with its lights flashing, and the doors opened fast. Nurses moved. A doctor called orders. A young woman climbed out after the stretcher, trembling, asking if she could stay with her father. A staff member put an arm around her shoulders and said, "You are not alone. Come with us." Daniel closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. "That's enough," he said. And it was. People think justice is watching someone fall. Sometimes it is, but the better kind comes later. Quieter, after the wreckage is cleared, and something honest rises, where the lie used to stand. Vivian had built a palace of applause. We built a door that opened when people called. And every time it opened, I heard the answer my brother should have heard that day. "I am here. You are not alone. Help is coming."